Hey, it's Naftali. Today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different than I usually do. Usually I talk about coaching kind of in the context of entrepreneurship or um, business, that kind of stuff. Today I really wanted to talk about peace. And, um, just as a side note, the whole reason that I sort of do this coaching thing is because I believe that there's a way that we can um, create a much more peaceful world than the one we live in now through a new understanding. I heard on the radio they were talking about the death penalty and how California is, thinking of abolishing it, or the governor is. And, all the politics aside and even the moral questions aside of whether it's right or wrong, one woman called in to the show. This was on NPR, by the way. And she said, "Hey, my brother was brutally murdered about 25, 30 years ago." And she described the murder, which was pretty gruesome. I don't need to regale you with those details, but it was obviously very deliberate and gruesome and pretty horrific act. And she said at the time, I and my family sort of was against the death penalty, just sort of didn't think it was right. And so we felt that when this happened to my brother, that if we were going to be against the death penalty, that we couldn't sort of change our minds and decide that we were no longer against the death penalty just because something happened to our family. But then she went on to say that, she went to the parole hearing for the gentleman who was convicted of his murder. About 25 years after he'd spent 25 years in prison, and then he had this parole hearing, and she said she went, and she said, "I don't know why I went, but I just felt like I needed to be there to represent my brother." And the guy who had killed her brother came to her and said, I know you can never forgive me, but I just want you to know how sorry I am, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't wish that it was me who was the one who's dead instead of your brother. And the woman who called into the radio said, she said, we sat and we held hands and we cried a lot. And she said, I forgave him. And in fact, I spoke at his parole hearing, to speak on his behalf, supporting the idea that he be released from prison. She also said that she's so glad that she didn't support the death penalty, or that he wasn't put to death, because she said if he had been, we never would have had the opportunity for forgiveness, for understanding on both sides. And so my question, my thought in all of this is not that you should do this, but I'm saying if there exists the capacity, and I'm sure you've heard a similar story to this at some other point, but if there exists the capacity for someone who was so egregiously wronged to forgive, right? We can see that capacity exists. Why does it not show up more often? why do we hold on to grudges for obviously much, much, much smaller problems, if you will, right? So I don't want to preach and say like you should forgive and whatever. I'm just saying see that the capacity exists even in a situation that is likely far worse than anything you're dealing with right now, right? And that even in the face of reality, if you will, right? The reality is this guy killed her brother, right? This is not up for debate. There's no way to spin that story. But still, even in the face of that reality, there's space for compassion, for forgiveness, and for understanding, and for growth, right? I mean, this guy, he's changed. And this is not talking about policy or should we keep the death penalty or abolish it or longer prison sentences or shorter. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm saying the capacity for any human being, every human being, to have new thought in any moment, in every moment. And in that new thought is the capacity for seeing something totally new and totally different. And in that space of seeing something new and different, the opportunity for peace, right? We don't even need to think about, the global peace. How are we going to fix the wars? We need to think about, that guy at work who really pissed us off, that person who murdered my family member, that whatever. And again, this is not preachy. This is not, just do it. Just be, forgive people. Saying, understand that this capacity exists for us to see something new and for the whole world to look different because of that new thought. Yeah, if you are interested in chatting about this further from a personal or professional or any other context standpoint, I'd love to hear from you. So please leave a comment or send me a private message and we'll chat soon. Thanks.